Audience participation time. As we begin today, I always like giving you something to think about before you just sit and listen. So, audience participation time today is this. What is the answer to this equation? Don't yell it out, just get it in your head. What is the answer to this equation? I didn't really like math when I was in high school. I didn't hate it. It wasn't my best subject. I don't know. I took math classes. They never really thrilled me. Part of the reason why I didn't like math classes is because I didn't always remember the rules. I didn't always remember how to approach the question. So there are two possible answers that are very logical ways to deal with this question. There are two possible answers. First thing you could do is you could add the 2 and the 3, get a 5, multiply that by 4, and the answer is 20. Or you could multiply 3 and 4 and get 12 and add 2 and the answer is 14. Which is the right answer? 14 is the right answer. Why is 14 the right answer? What is the system that tells you you've got to do the multiplication part before you do the addition part? What is that called? It is called the... Pardon me?
Order of instructions.
What? You'll have to tell me that one later.
Brackets.
Exponents.
Math. Yeah.
We'll have a math class later. What I was looking for was order of operations. Yeah, that's what I wanted to hear. And the order of operations tells you that you do multiplication before you do addition. So the answer is 14. Why am I telling you this? Why are we doing math in the sermon? Well, basically just because I needed to kill about 5 minutes, so it has nothing to do with my sermon. I just wanted to know the answer, right? No. I think lots of times when we approach Bible things, we get a similar problem happening. We come to Bible questions and we say to ourselves, how do we approach this problem? And we come up with something that seems to make some sense. To people who don't know the idea of order of operations, adding the 2 and the 3 and multiplying by 4 and getting 20, that makes some sense, right? That's a logical kind of way to approach it. You end up with the wrong answer. You're not doing it correctly, but you get an answer that you can at least understand how we got there, right? But it makes a lot more sense, and you get the right answer when you know the order in which things ought to happen. When you know how to think about the question properly, then you get the proper answer. As I said earlier, I want to suggest to you that when it comes to giving and being generous, when it comes to thinking about how we use what we've been given, I want to suggest to you that we've got the answer 20. We've thought about it incorrectly. We've thought about it in a way that makes some sense, but we haven't actually thought about it in the right way. So here's the equation that most of us use when it comes to determining whether we ought to give something to someone. Here's how the equation normally looks. You have some resources. Either you've got some money, or you've got some time, or you've got a skill, or you've got some ability. You've got some sort of resource that someone needs. And that could be useful to someone, and you've piled up some resources. There's a group, or a person, or a cause, or an organization that needs something. And so you look at your resources, and then you look at their need, and you try and determine how much you subtract from what you have to give to them, and you end up with some sort of donation. That's how most of us think about giving. I've got something that I've stored up. You need something, here's a portion of it. Now, this isn't a terrible way to think about giving. This isn't a horrible thing. It gets us a pretty good answer most of the time. Most of the people thinking this way have done some really great things. Telemiracle in Saskatchewan benefits from this type of thinking. Telemiracle raises piles of money because somebody says, I have some money and they need some money, so I'll give them some money. That's how that works. United Way in Estevan raises all kinds of money because they've done that, right? There are various organizations in town where people say, I've got some time and you have a need, I'll give you some time. This equation works well enough. It even works well enough in church. By the way, it's worked well enough that we're $1 over budget. Isn't that beautiful? Look at that. By the way, I'm actually serious. We should be celebrating that. Can I tell you how often it is that in October somebody's in my office wringing their hands saying, we're $100 behind on our budget, and fretting about the budget. Nobody celebrates when we're actually making budget. So could we celebrate a little about that? Not here now, but sometime. Did you pat yourself on the back that we're not in dire straits? That's a good thing. This equation has worked well enough in some ways. But if Jesus were to walk through the door today, if Jesus were to stand in front of you today, I think he would tell you that's an inadequate equation. It's not correct. It's not right. You're not thinking it through properly. You've done the order of operations incorrectly here. And he'd give you a different equation. He'd give you a different way to think about it. He'd give you a different answer. And it's that answer I want to show you today. Jesus' giving equation is found in one particular spot in its form, but I'll show it to you in lots of different ways in principle throughout the rest of the book. If you have a Bible open, Matthew chapter 10 is where we're going to start this morning. In Matthew chapter 10, Jesus has been on the earth for a little while now. He has been baptized, he's been teaching, he's been leading. He's gathered up a group of people that he's calling his disciples, and now he's at a point where he's taught them long enough that he's going to send these disciples out to do some things. He's going to send them out to preach. He's going to send them out to heal. You'll read this in a moment. He's sending them out, and he sends them out with some very specific instructions. Matthew chapter 10, beginning in verse 7, here are his instructions about how they are to do their job. It says this: "As you go, preach this message. The kingdom of heaven is near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons." So that's what they're going to offer. They're going to offer a message of hope. They're going to offer a message of healing. They're going to offer a message of joy. They're going to offer a message that the people have been waiting for a long time. That's what they're out to do. He says in the very next portion, "Freely you have received, freely give. Do not take any gold or silver or copper in your belts. Take no bag for the journey or an extra tunic or sandals, for the worker is worth his keep." Did you see the principle that he's going to give them here? He says, I want to send you out, and I want you to go out, and I want you to give this message to people. I want you to share with people. And then he throws in a little line that if you didn't look for it, you might not see it. But it's really significant. He says, here's how I'm going to get you to think about these things. I want you to think in terms of, freely you have received, freely give. Jesus' equation about how we're going to go through this stuff is, I want you to think about the idea that we're just going to go out and give this stuff. We've received something and we're going to give it away. When we start thinking about giving, and when we start talking about money, and when we start talking about our time, and we start talking about demands on us, often we think about that side of the equation. We think about our giving. Which is why we have that other equation that says, what should I be giving? Because we start by thinking about giving. But in this paragraph, Jesus actually does talk about them getting paid, but that's not where he starts. Jesus doesn't start with how they're going to get it back. He's going to start with this side of the equation that says, freely you have received. And I want to suggest to you that when we start thinking about giving, whether it's money, time, resources, anything else, when we start thinking about giving, this is the side of the equation we should start with. We shouldn't think about what can I spare. We shouldn't think about what do they need. We shouldn't think about do they deserve it. Our first thought ought to be, I've been given something. What have I been given? How have I been blessed? What do I have? Where did that come from? Because the word in here, there's one word that's really significant, and that is received. Jesus doesn't say, you have earned some stuff. He says it's been given to you. It's been entrusted to you. You've been allowed to have some time or some money or some health. What are you going to do with it? It's been given to you. And we need to start with this side of the equation because that's a different way to think. When I think that I have earned my stuff, when I think the stuff in my bank account is what I have made, then I protect it. Then it's mine. It's finite. That's it. But when I understand that it's been given to me, when I understand I've been blessed with it, when I understand that it's come from somewhere else, I approach it differently. Let me tell you a quick story about Murphy. When Murphy was a puppy, one of the things, Sarah knew more about raising puppies than me, one of the things she'd do every once in a while, when Murphy was eating, we'd go over and pull his food bowl away from him when he was eating. Because we wanted him to know that this food bowl isn't yours. This isn't your food. You have this food because we've given it to you. We're the ones in charge, not you. It was really interesting. Every once in a while, you'd go and pull it away and you'd start growling at you, right? You'd touch this bowl and you'd go, "Arr!" And I'd think, oh, no. This isn't your food, Murphy. You didn't make this food. You didn't come by this food. You have this food because we're nice to you. You have this food because we've looked after you. You have this food because we poured it out of the bag. This isn't your food. And eventually, every once in a while, we'd go and yank it away from him, and he'd growl, and we'd take it away and give it back. And then we'd take it away another time and give it back. And eventually, we could take his food away, and he wouldn't growl at us. Because he knew he was getting it back. He knew that we weren't going to be mean to him. We were just teaching him that this comes from me, not you. We live in a world that says your food is yours. We live in a world that says you filled your food bowl. We live in a world that says whatever you want to do with that food bowl is fine. You can keep it for yourself. You can growl at everybody and just keep it for yourself because it's your food bowl. Jesus says it's not your food bowl. The only reason you have food in your bowl is because God has blessed you. It has been given to you. You've been entrusted with something. You've been given a gift. And when I start with that premise, then it changes the way I see the things that I have. It changes the way I see my time and my life and my money and everything else, because now it's been given to me to use. That means I could probably find more if I needed it. God could give me more. If I gave away all the food in my bowl, God probably has more that he could give me. If I'm just working for that, if I've earned all that, I don't know if I can do that again, but God could give it to me again, could he not? So Jesus says, I want you to think, freely you have received, therefore freely you will give. We've got to start on the other side of the equation. Things go wrong when we forget the first part of the equation. Things go wrong when we stop thinking about what we've received, what we've been given, how greatly we've been treated, how nicely God has looked after us. Things go wrong when we forget that. And to prove that, Jesus told another parable a little later on in the book of Matthew. Matthew chapter 18, he tells another story that highlights the other side of this situation. When we forget what we've been given, here's what happens. Matthew 18, a story that we like to call the parable of the unmerciful servant. Matthew chapter 18, this story says this. This is a parable of Jesus that you know quite well, but think of it not in terms of forgiveness, which is the story that Jesus is telling, but think of it in terms of why he acts this way. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven, this is verse 23 of Matthew 18, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 talents. A footnote in my Bible, written in 1984, says that's about $1 million, so you can guess how much it is today. A man who owed him about $1 million was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all they had be sold to repay the debt. The servant fell on his knees before him and said, "Be patient with me, and I will pay everything back." The servant's master took pity on him and canceled the debt and let him go. $1 million, let him go. But when that servant went out, he found his fellow servant who owed him a few hundred denarii, $10. He grabbed him and began to choke him and said, "Pay back what you owe me." The fellow servant fell on his knees and begged him, "Be patient with me, I will pay you back." But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. When the other servants saw what happened, they were greatly distressed and went and told their master everything that happened. The master called the servant in and said, "You wicked servant. I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to? Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? Shouldn't you have realized that you had been given something and you should give freely to someone else? Shouldn't you have understood what you had been gifted? Shouldn't you have understood that you'd been let off the hook? Shouldn't you have understood how blessed you were, and you should have then gone and blessed someone else, but you didn't? You were blessed beyond imagination, and what did you do? You went out and you tried to grab another guy for $10. You were given $1 million gift, and you went out and treated somebody so poorly over a few dimes. What is wrong with you? That's what the master says. What is wrong with you, you wicked servant? Wicked is not a very common word in the Word of God. Not many people are called wicked. This servant is. He is evil. He is wicked because he's forgotten that he was given something. And then didn't act in accord to that gift. In anger, his master turned him over to the jailers to be tortured until he could pay back all that he owed. How long is it going to take him to pay back all that he owes when he owes over $1 million and he's being tortured currently? How long is it going to take him to pay it back? Never paying it back. Jesus says this is how it looks. This is how it goes wrong when we forget that we've been given something. When we forget that we've been gifted something. When we think it's ours. When we think we are on our own and we're not accountable to anybody. But Jesus says you are accountable. You are accountable to me. I am the master who's given you everything you have. How will you then treat others? What will you then do with it? Where will you go? I have given you so much. You've received so much. You've had so much. So therefore you ought to freely give to everybody else. That's Jesus' mindset. And that's his equation about how giving ought to look. And it ought to be my mindset. And it's not. It's not. Most of the time my mindset is, this is mine, and you need a portion, I'll give you a little. Jesus said, what would it look like? What would it look like if you looked at everything you've been given and then responded based on what you've been given, not what people need, but on what you've been given? The picture would change pretty significantly, wouldn't it? Picture I like the best of this is a fountain. I like this fountain. Anyone ever notice this fountain in Wascana Park? This is just your aside for the morning. This is called Trafalgar Fountain. It used to stand in Trafalgar Square in London. It stood there from 1845 to 1939 until they decided to build bigger fountains in Trafalgar Square. There were two of them. One of them's in Ottawa and the other one's now in Regina. I love this fountain because it's a classic fountain. What does it do? Water goes up the middle of it and sprays up into the air. And that water lands in that top bowl and fills it up. And when that top bowl fills up, what does it do? It overflows and fills the next one. And then that one fills up. And what does it do? It overflows and it fills the next one. The bowls of the fountain are not filled by themselves. The bowls of the fountain are not the source of their water. The bowls of the fountain are only filled up because there's water spraying up in the air. Then the water spraying up in the air comes down, and then that overflows, and it overflows again, and it overflows again. And it's beautiful when you see it, and it's lovely to hear, and it's a lovely thing. We make fountains because they're beautiful. We like them. The overflowing bit is the cool part. Jesus would say to you, this is what your life ought to look like. I'm spraying your blessings in the air, and as they come down, you can overflow them to other people. And when other people could see that, if you would freely give, they would say, boy, that's beautiful. That's amazing. And the other thing Jesus would say is, because you're giving of what you have received, not what you've earned, you never have to worry about that water in the middle running out. I'll supply. I'll supply it. You just overflow it. The other illustration that makes me think of this when I start talking about things that just keep coming and overflowing and give it away and all that sort of stuff, I think about the clothing outlet downstairs. How long has the clothing outlet been going? Does anyone know? 20 years, maybe a little more? I don't know, something like that. Guess how often we've had to worry about clothes coming in so that we could give them away? Doug, Penny, do you have any shortage of clothes at the moment? I'm always shocked. Every single day. I carried one down this morning. Every day I come, there's a pile of clothes here. The clothes just keep coming. And people are shocked when they come and say, well, what does this cost me? And we say, nothing. And they say, well, what? How can you give this away? And we say, what? People give it to us, and we give it away. People put it on our step, we bring it in, we give it to you. Why would we charge you? Because there's an endless supply of clothes. There's more clothes than we can carry downstairs. That's a pretty good illustration of our life if we see it properly. You're not dealing with finite things. There's an endless supply that just keeps coming. I don't know where it's coming from tomorrow. Somebody in Carlisle will bring us a bag of clothes tomorrow. Somebody in Macun will bring another one. Somehow we're going to get what we need so we can just keep giving. You've received it freely. Why would you charge for it? Why would you hold it back? Why would you gather? Why would we fill our basement with clothes? People have given it to us. Why would we hoard it? And yet in other things I do. I say, well, I don't want to help at camp because I don't have time. I've got all kinds of time. Jesus has given me another day. I have this day. I could do something, but I don't want to. So I say I don't have time because I think it's my time. Right? We hoard our own stuff because we think it's ours. But that's not the equation Jesus gives us. Jesus' equation is important because if we don't believe the first part, let me go back here. If you don't believe the first part, you won't do the second. That's why this matters. If you don't believe the first part, that you've been blessed, you'll never do the second one. So let me give you one other quick example from Scripture. In 2 Corinthians chapter 8, and if you really want to study this idea a little bit more, go read the letter of 2 Corinthians in its entirety, because Paul talks in here several times about how the church in Corinth was giving. But 2 Corinthians chapter 8 will give us a taste of it. I want you to see this. Here's the principle in action. The church in Corinth knew one thing. They knew that they had been given something. They'd been given some spiritual blessings. They'd been given Christ on the cross. They'd been given hope. They'd been given life. They'd been given so many blessings that it's causing them now to act in a certain way. And here's how Paul describes it. Listen to the description. He says, brothers, I want you to know about the grace that God has given the Macedonian churches, the Grecian churches. Out of the most severe trial, they don't have much physically. Out of their severe trial, their overflowing joy, notice the word overflowing, and their extreme poverty welled up in what? Rich generosity. So they've got nothing. Let me tell you about these Grecian churches. They've got nothing. They're as poor as anybody I know. But they have a rich spirit. And they think they've been blessed. And so out of their poverty, with their blessed hearts, they are being richly generous. They're overflowing with generosity. Because they believe the first part. I've been blessed, so now they're blessing. For I testify that they gave as much as they were able. Not just a portion. They gave what they could. Not everything. They looked after themselves. They kept their house and whatever. But they gave what they were able to give. And even then beyond their ability. Why do they want to give? Because they know they've been given too. They've got the right equation. Entirely on their own, they urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service to the saints. What is the service to the saints they want to so urgently be part of? They want to give some money. Entirely on their own, they urgently begged us to let them help give some money, even though they've got nothing. I like the picture there, because if you talk to any fundraiser, whether it's a camp fundraiser or when we had the school or any other fundraiser, most of the time you're trying to wrench money out of people's hands. You're not being urgently begged to take it. These guys are urgently begging us to take their money so they can help. Why? Because they understand the equation. They understand they've been blessed. They understand that it's been freely given to them, so they're going to freely give it on. And they did not do as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord and then in keeping with God's, and then to us in keeping with God's will. So we urge Titus, since he'd earlier made a beginning, to bring it to completion, this act of grace on your part. Just as you excel in everything, in speech, in faith, in knowledge, in complete earnestness, and in love for yourselves, see that you also excel in this grace of giving. Excel in this grace of giving. Don't just do your little bit. Don't just do your portion. Don't just do whatever you can spare. But excel in the grace of giving. Why does that matter? Because it shows that you understand the other side that says you've been given so much. They understood the equation. So, if you walk out of here this morning and say, well, what on earth am I supposed to do with all this? Here's all I really wanted to do. I just wanted to shove your thinking a little bit. I just wanted to shove my thinking because I don't think properly most of the time. I think I need to hold on to stuff. I think I'm in trouble most of the time. I think I better make sure I'm okay. Jesus wants to push our thinking a little bit. And maybe the questions that we should be asking ourselves are not, what can I give? Maybe the question we ought to ask ourselves is, what have I been given? Because that will bring us a different result. When we start with the first question, what can I give? Then you get a little bit. You get a portion. You get a part. When I start with the second question, then I get a long list of things that I've been given, ways I've been blessed, things that have been looked after that I couldn't figure out on my own. People into my life that I needed at the right time. Therefore, maybe I could be that person to someone else. Not even just all about money. It's just about availability. What could you do with what you've been given? Jesus ends this sort of thought pattern in Luke chapter 6. He says it this way. Give. Just go out and give. It's a command, by the way, in this passage. Give and it will be given to you. That's his guarantee. Give and it will be given to you. Maybe not monetarily. Maybe you'll get a blessing some other way. But go out and give and it will be given to you. And how will it be given? It will be given in good measure. It'll be your measuring cup up to the line and then a little bit more. It'll be pressed down, packed in really tight, not just all fluffy and as little as I can give you, but I will give it to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over. There's that overflowing idea again, right? It'll be given to you, he says. Don't be afraid to go and give. You will have blessings out of it all over the place. More than you can count, more than you need, more than you can imagine. For with the same measure you measure, it'll be measured back to you. That's the guarantee. That's the words of Christ. This is what I'll do. Will you try it? Will you test me in this? Will you see if it's true? I've mentioned this lots of times. I love Bob always says you can't outgive God. He's tried. I've seen it. I don't think Bob's doing too badly, right? Been blessed along the way. When I think, what do I have and what's your need, and I'll give you a little bit, I'll just give you a little bit. But when I think God's blessed me so much, I've been freely given so I can freely give. Maybe I approach the problem with a different look. Maybe I approach with a different order of operations. Maybe I think a little differently. Maybe I find a blessing that I don't have yet. Brothers and sisters, what have you been given, and are you willing to share it? It stands to be said.